The day Princess learned she was worthless, the sky above Prime was a perfect shade of gold. She remembered that detail because it seemed so wrong. Such terrible news should have come with storm clouds and thunder. Instead, the sun shone brightly through the crystal windows of the medical chamber as the physician spoke the words that ended her life. "The princess carries no life spark," the old doctor said to her father, the emperor. No one looked at her anymore. "She is barren, there is no cure." Emperor sat on his floating throne, his 4 arms crossed over his chest. His violet skin, the same shade as his daughter's, seemed darker in that moment. His silver eyes held no warmth as he studied the young woman who stood before him. Was 28 years old by Earth counting. Among her people, she was just reaching the age when royal females began producing heirs. Her 2 older sisters had already given the empire 7 children between them. Her younger sister was pregnant with twins, but's womb would never quicken with life. The genetic tests had confirmed what the doctors suspected. She was broken in the most fundamental way a woman could be broken. "What do you suggest?" the emperor asked his advisors. He spoke as if was not standing right there, as if she was already gone. Lord Cashin, the chief advisor, stepped forward. He was an old male with gray skin and calculating eyes. He had never liked. Now he smiled slightly as he gave his answer. "The Barren princess is a shame to the royal bloodline," he said. "She cannot be allowed to remain on Prime. Her presence will invite mockery from our enemies. I suggest a quiet execution, made to look like an accident. We can tell the other empires that she died of a rare illness." Felt her heart stop, both of them. She wanted to scream, to beg, to run, but she had been raised as royalty. She stood perfectly still and showed nothing on her face. "That seems wasteful," the emperor's second wife said from her seat beside the throne. Empress had always hated its mother, the first wife who had died giving birth to. That hatred had passed to the daughter. Perhaps the mining colonies would take her. She could work until she dies naturally. At least then she would be useful. The advisors murmured their agreement, closed her eyes. The mining colonies were death sentences. The work was brutal, the conditions terrible. Most workers did not survive more than 5 years. "There is another option," a younger advisor spoke up. His name was, and he had always been kind to when others were not. "The humans have requested a royal bride. They wish to cement our new alliance with a marriage. We had planned to send Princess, but why waste her fertility on primitives? Send the barren one instead. The humans are too ignorant to know the difference. And if she is unhappy among them, well, that is fitting punishment for her defect." Laughter filled the council chamber. Even the emperor smiled slightly at the suggestion. The humans were considered barely civilized by standards. They had only achieved interstellar travel a century ago. They were short, their bodies weak, their technology primitive. Sending a defective princess to live among them was both practical and amusing. "Very well," Emperor declared. "My daughter will be sent to Earth as a diplomatic bride. Inform the humans that we accept their request for a royal marriage." And just like that, fate was sealed. She was given 3 days to prepare. No one came to say goodbye. Her sisters avoided her as if barrenness was a disease they might catch. Her stepmother sent servants to pack her belongings, making it clear that herself was not welcome in the family quarters anymore. On the morning of her departure, walked alone to the shuttle that would carry her away from the only home she had ever known. The palace guards did not salute her. The servants did not bow. She had become invisible, a ghost haunting the halls until she could be properly disposed of. As the shuttle lifted off, pressed her hand against the window and watched Prime grow smaller beneath her. The golden cities, the crystal towers, the purple forests that stretched across the northern continent. She would never see any of it again. She did not cry, she had forgotten how. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. Spent most of it in her small cabin, reading everything she could find about her new home. The information was not encouraging. Humans were short-lived. dying of old age before they reached 150 years. They had only 2 arms and fragile bodies that could be killed by simple falls or minor illnesses. Their planet was mostly water, and their civilizations had spent most of their history fighting each other. But there were other things too, strange things. Humans created art that served no practical purpose. They told stories about impossible events and called it entertainment. They formed family bonds that had nothing to do with genetics or political advantage. They kept animals in their homes simply because they enjoyed the company. Did not understand these beings. She was not sure she wanted to. When the shuttle finally landed on Earth, at a place called New Geneva, expected to find a crowd of curious primitives staring at her like she was an exotic creature. Instead, she found a single human male standing on the landing platform, holding a flower in one hand and wearing an expression of nervous hope on his face. He was not impressive by any standard, average height for a human, brown eyes that seemed too soft for a warrior, brown hair that was slightly messy, as if he had forgotten to arrange it properly. He wore a simple uniform with the markings of the United Earth Fleet, but his rank was not particularly high. "Princess?" he asked as she descended the ramp. His voice was gentle. "I'm Daniel. I'm going to be your husband, if that's okay with you." If that's okay with you. No male had ever asked her opinion about anything, stared at this strange creature for a long moment. "I brought you this," Daniel continued, holding out the flower. It was a simple thing, white petals with a yellow center. "It's called a daisy. It's not fancy or anything, but I thought, everyone deserves something nice when they arrive somewhere new." Took the flower. Her hands were trembling slightly, though she did not know why. "I know this isn't what either of us planned," Daniel said. "And I know you probably expected someone more important than a lieutenant commander, but I promise I'll treat you with respect. Whatever this becomes, I'd like us to at least be friends. Is that okay?" Looked at the flower in her hands. Then she looked at the human male with his nervous smile and his kind eyes. She thought about the council chamber on Prime, where her own family had laughed about sending her to the primitives. "Yes," she said quietly, "that is okay." She did not know it then, but her new life had just begun. The first thing learned about humans was that they ate together. On meals were private affairs. Royalty ate alone in their chambers, served by silent attendants who kept their eyes down. Food was fuel, nothing more. But on Earth, Daniel's family gathered around a single table in a small apartment in a city called Chicago, and they passed dishes to each other while talking loudly about everything and nothing. "You're too thin," Daniel's mother said the moment she saw. Her name was, and she was a small woman with gray hair and a fierce expression. Before could respond, had pulled her into a tight embrace. "Sit down, eat, we have plenty." Did not know what to do. Physical contact between strangers was considered rude on. But arms were warm and her voice was kind, and found herself sitting at the crowded table before she could think of a polite way to refuse. Daniel's father was named. He was a quiet man who smiled easily and laughed often. He challenged to a game of chess after dinner, and when she won in 12 moves, he clapped his hands together in delight. "Finally," he exclaimed, "someone who can actually play. Daniel is terrible at this game. Maybe you can teach him." Daniel groaned from across the room. "Thanks, Dad. Really appreciate the support." Daniel's younger sister was named. She was 25 years old and full of questions. What kind of music did listen to? What did they wear to parties? Did have any hobbies? Did she want to go shopping tomorrow? The questions came so fast that could barely keep up, but there was no cruelty in them, no hidden judgment. Was simply curious, the way a child might be curious about a fascinating new toy. That first visit lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, was exhausted but strangely happy. No one had asked about her fertility. No one had treated her like she was defective or shameful. They had simply welcomed her into their home and fed her too much food. "Your family is very loud," told Daniel as they drove back to their apartment that night. Daniel laughed. "Yeah, they are. Sorry about that. I hope they didn't overwhelm you." "No," said slowly. "It was nice, different but nice." Over the following months, discovered more strange things about humans. They celebrated birthdays, marking each year of life as if it was something special rather than simply expected. They gave gifts for no reason at all. They said, "I love you" out loud in public, without shame or embarrassment. Daniel took her hiking through forests that were nothing like the purple trees of. These trees were green, and the air smelled like dirt and rain and something sweet she could not identify. He showed her the ocean, vast and blue and endless, and she stood at the edge of the water feeling very small. He introduced her to coffee, a bitter drink that she hated at first but eventually grew to love. He taught her about movies, those strange human stories told through moving pictures. He took her to restaurants where the food came from every corner of the planet, each dish different from the last. But the most important thing Daniel taught her was this. On Earth, a woman's worth was not measured by her ability to produce children. Discovered this truth slowly, through many small moments. She met women who had chosen never to have children and were respected for their careers and accomplishments. She learned about couples who could not have biological children and had adopted orphans instead, loving them just as fiercely as any parent loved a child of their own blood. She read about humans who spent their lives caring for others, teaching children, healing the sick, creating art, building communities, all without any concern for genetic legacy. The concept was so foreign to her that she struggled to understand it at first. Everything revolved around reproduction. Political alliances were formed through marriage contracts that guaranteed heirs. A woman who could not bear children was considered worthless, useless, a waste of resources. But humans saw things differently. "Why doesn't it matter to you?" asked Daniel one evening. They were sitting on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sun sink into the Pacific Ocean. The sky was turning orange and pink and purple, colors she had never seen on Prime. Daniel looked at her with confusion in his brown eyes. "Why doesn't what matter?" "That I cannot have children. I was told my whole life that I was broken, defective, that no male would ever want me because I could not give him heirs, but you volunteered to marry me knowing I was barren. Why?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and serious. "I didn't marry you to get something from you. I volunteered because I thought you deserved a chance at a real life, not exile to some mining colony or whatever else they might have done to you. And honestly, I didn't think much about children at all. I figured if we wanted kids someday, we could adopt. Plenty of children out there need good homes." Stared at him. "You would raise a child that is not your own blood." "Of course, blood doesn't make a family, love does." Something broke open inside's chest. She had spent 28 years believing she was worthless. She had accepted the judgment of her father, her sisters, her entire civilization. But this human, this simple man with his nervous smile and his gentle eyes, saw her differently. She reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact between them. Daniel's fingers curled around hers, warm and steady. 6 months later, the ambassador visited Earth as part of a routine diplomatic tour. His name was Lord, and he had known since she was a child. When he saw her at the formal reception, he barely acknowledged her presence. "The defective princess," he murmured to his aide, not knowing that could hear every word. "At least she is out of the way here. The emperor was wise to dispose of her among the primitives." Felt the familiar shame rising in her chest. She lowered her eyes and started to step back, to make herself small and invisible the way she had learned to do on. But then Daniel was there beside her. He stepped forward, placing himself between and the ambassador. His jaw was tight, and there was steel in his voice when he spoke. "Her name is," he said, and she is worth more than your entire delegation. Don't forget it." Lord sputtered in shock. No one would dare speak to an ambassador that way. But Daniel did not care about customs or political consequences. He cared about his wife. That night, alone in their apartment, wrapped her arms around Daniel and held him close. She did not have words for what she was feeling. She only knew that something had changed inside her. For the first time in her life, she felt like she might be worth something after all. The sickness started slowly. At first thought she had eaten something bad. Human food was still strange to her, and sometimes her body rejected certain ingredients. But this was different. Every morning she woke up feeling dizzy and nauseous. The smell of coffee, which she had learned to love, suddenly made her stomach turn. Food she had enjoyed for months now tasted wrong, too sweet or too salty or too strong. "Maybe you caught a virus," Daniel suggested one morning, watching her with worried eyes as she pushed her breakfast away untouched. "Humans get sick all the time. It's probably nothing serious." But knew her body. Something was changing inside her, something she could not explain. Her senses, always sharper than human senses, had become almost painfully acute. She could hear conversations from 3 rooms away. The sunlight hurt her eyes. Every smell was overwhelming, a flood of information that made her head spin. "I think you should see a doctor," Daniel said after she spent 3 days barely able to eat. "A real doctor who knows about biology. There's a scientist at the Medical Institute who has been studying your species. His name is Dr. Cole. Will you let me take you to see him?" Agreed, mostly because she was too tired to argue. Dr. Cole was a tall, thin man with white hair and bright blue eyes that seemed to look right through her. His laboratory was filled with screens displaying genetic data and biological information from dozens of species. He asked hundreds of questions about her symptoms, took samples of her blood and tissue, and ran tests that took 3 full days to complete. When he finally called them back to his office, his expression was strange. He looked excited and confused and nervous all at the same time. "I've run these results 7 times," Dr. Cole said. "I thought the equipment was broken. Then I thought I was reading the data wrong, but there's no mistake." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Princess, you're pregnant." The room went completely silent. Heard the words, but they did not make sense. They could not make sense. She had been tested by the best physicians on Prime. Her genetic markers had been analyzed down to the smallest detail. She was barren. She would never conceive a child. That was the truth she had lived with for her entire adult life. "That's impossible," she whispered. "That's what I thought too," Dr. Cole replied. "So I dug deeper into the data. What I found is remarkable." He pulled up a display showing 2 sets of genetic information side by side. Fertility depends on a very specific set of genetic markers. If both parents don't have compatible markers, conception cannot occur. Your markers, princess, are incompatible with all known genetic profiles. That's why you were diagnosed as barren. "Then how can I be pregnant?" asked. Her voice was shaking. "Because human DNA operates on a completely different system," Dr. Cole explained. "Humans don't have the same genetic markers that do. When human and genetics combine, they interact in ways we never predicted. Your body isn't defective, princess. It was simply waiting for the right partner, a partner whose biology complemented yours instead of conflicting with it." Could not breathe. She looked at Daniel, who had gone pale beside her. "We're going to be parents?" Daniel asked. His voice cracked on the last word. "You are," Dr. Cole confirmed. "Based on the developmental rate I'm observing, I estimate the child will be born in approximately 7 months." Daniel made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He turned to and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding, fast and strong. "A baby," he kept saying. "We're having a baby." Clung to him, trembling from head to toe. For 28 years she had been told she was broken. For 28 years she had believed that motherhood was something she would never experience, a door that was permanently closed to her. Her own family had laughed at her. Her own father had sent her away to die among strangers. And now everything had changed. "There's more you should know," Dr. Cole said gently, interrupting their embrace. "This pregnancy is completely unique. There has never been a human hybrid before. Your child will be the first of its kind." "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. "It means we don't know exactly what to expect. The child will likely have traits from both species, enhanced strength and senses from the side, perhaps a longer, possibly abilities we can't even predict." Dr. Cole's eyes were shining with scientific excitement. "This isn't just a baby. This is a new chapter in the history of both our civilizations." Placed her hand on her abdomen. She could not feel the child yet, not physically, but she knew it was there. A tiny spark of life growing inside her, proof that she was not worthless after all. "Will the child be healthy?" she asked. "I believe so," Dr. Cole said. "Your body has adapted remarkably well to the pregnancy. The fetus is developing normally, just faster than a human pregnancy. We'll monitor you closely, of course, but right now everything looks good." That night lay awake in bed, her hand resting on her stomach. Daniel was asleep beside her, exhausted from the emotional storm of the day. She could hear his slow, steady breathing. She thought about Prime. She thought about the council chamber where her father had decided her fate. She thought about Lord Cassian suggesting her execution, about Empress wanting to send her to the mining colonies, about Advisor laughing at the idea of sending her to the primitives. They had all been so certain she was worthless. They had thrown her away like garbage. And now she carried something precious inside her, something that would have made her the most valuable princess in the entire empire, something that would have changed everything if only they had known. Part of her wanted revenge. Part of her wanted to send a message to her father, to show him what he had lost. Part of her wanted to see the shock on their faces when they learned the truth. But a larger part of her simply felt grateful. If she had been fertile by standards, she would still be on Prime. She would have been married off to some lord or prince who saw her only as a breeding vessel. She would never have come to Earth. She would never have met Daniel. She would never have known what it felt like to be loved for who she was, not what she could produce. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. She was not sure who she was thanking. Perhaps the universe. Perhaps whatever power had brought her to this strange blue planet and this gentle man. She fell asleep with her hand on her stomach and a smile on her face, dreaming of the future for the first time in her life. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Dr. Cole had sworn his staff to secrecy, but secrets have a way of escaping. Within 2 weeks, rumors were spreading across Earth. Within a month, the story had reached every human colony in the galaxy. And within 3 months, the news arrived on Prime. The first human pregnancy in history. A miracle child growing inside a princess that everyone had believed was barren. On Earth, the reaction was celebration. Messages of congratulation flooded in from every corner of human space. Scientists requested permission to study the pregnancy. Artists painted portraits of and Daniel. Schools invited them to speak to children about cooperation between species. Strangers on the street stopped to wish them well. Had never experienced anything like it. She had been invisible at best, scorned at worst. But here, on this strange planet full of short-lived, loud, emotional beings, she was celebrated. Not because of her royal blood or her political connections, but because she represented something humans valued deeply, hope for the future. "They really care about us," she said to Daniel one evening, reading through hundreds of messages that had arrived that day. "They don't even know us, but they care." "That's what humans do," Daniel replied with a smile. "We get excited about new beginnings." But not everyone was celebrating. The message from Prime arrived 6 weeks after the news became public. It came through official diplomatic channels, bearing the seal of Emperor himself. Daniel was at work when it arrived. opened it alone in their apartment, her hands trembling as she read the words. To the government of United Earth, the message began. The Empire hereby demands the immediate return of Princess. As a member of the imperial bloodline, she remains the property of the crown. Her current pregnancy represents a genetic asset of immense value to our civilization. She will be returned to Prime within 30 standard days. Failure to comply will be considered an act of war. Read the message 3 times. Property. They called her property. After everything they had done to her, after sending her away to die among primitives, now they wanted her back. Not because they cared about her, because she was suddenly useful again. When Daniel came home that evening, he found her sitting in the dark, the message glowing on her tablet. He read it once, then set it down with a careful, controlled motion. "They can't have you," he said quietly. "I won't allow it." "They have 12 warships approaching the solar system," replied. Her voice was hollow. "The fleet could destroy Earth's defenses in a matter of hours. You cannot fight them, Daniel." "Watch me." The standoff began the next day. Admiral Karen Price, commander of Earth's defensive fleet, met the delegation at the edge of the solar system. She was 62 years old with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. Her flagship was old and outdated compared to the sleek warships, but she positioned it directly in their path and refused to move. "The princess has chosen to remain on Earth," Admiral Price announced over the communication channel. "She is a citizen of United Earth now, and we protect our citizens. Your demand is rejected." Lord, the same ambassador who had called defective, responded with cold fury. "You would risk the destruction of your entire species over one barren female." "First of all, she's not barren. Your own doctors were wrong about that." Admiral Price's voice was steady as stone. "Second, she's not just a female, she's a person with rights. And third, yes, we would absolutely risk war, because humans don't abandon our own. Your fleet is no match for ours." "Maybe not, but we don't give up easily, and you might be surprised what we're capable of when we're protecting someone we love." The standoff lasted 3 days. During those 3 days, something remarkable happened. Ships began arriving from every corner of human space, warships from Mars, cargo vessels from the asteroid belt, mining craft from the moons of Jupiter. Research stations emptied their hangars. Civilian freighters volunteered to join the defensive line. Some of the ships were barely held together with welding and hope. None of them had any chance against weapons. It didn't matter, they came anyway. Watched the sensor feeds from the hospital room where she was being monitored. Tears streamed down her face as she saw the ships gathering. Hundreds of them, then thousands. Humans from every colony, every station, every corner of their small civilization, coming together to protect one alien woman and her unborn child. "Why?" she asked Daniel, who sat beside her holding her hand. "Why would they do this?" "Because you're family now," he said simply, "and family is everything." On Prime, the Emperor watched the same sensor feeds with growing concern. His advisors had assured him that humans would surrender immediately when faced with superior firepower. They had not anticipated this stubborn, irrational defiance. Even more troubling were the reports coming from within his own empire. News of the pregnancy had spread to Ordinary. They had seen images of with her human husband, heard stories of how she had been treated, learned about a civilization that valued people over breeding capacity. Whispers of discontent were spreading through the lower classes. Questions were being asked about the old ways, the old laws, the old cruelties. The Emperor could crush Earth easily, but doing so might spark rebellion at home. On the 4th day, Lord received new orders. His face was carefully blank as he transmitted the message to Admiral Price. "The Empire withdraws its demand for the return of Princess. She may remain on Earth if she chooses. This matter is concluded." The fleet turned and departed without another word. Aboard the human ships, cheering erupted on every channel. Strangers hugged each other. People wept with relief. Someone started singing an old Earth anthem, and soon thousands of voices had joined in. In her hospital room, held Daniel close and cried harder than she had ever cried in her life. These were not tears of sadness. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude, of disbelief, of joy. She had been thrown away by her own people, but she had been claimed by another people, a strange and wonderful people who did impossible things for no logical reason at all. "I love you," she whispered to Daniel. It was the first time she had said those words. He kissed her forehead gently. "I love you too, both of you." 1 month later, went into labor. The labor began at midnight. Woke from a deep sleep with a gasp, her hand flying to her stomach. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a deep pressure that seemed to come from the very center of her being. She turned to Daniel, who was already awake, already reaching for her. "It's time," she whispered. They had prepared for this moment for months. Dr. Cole and his team had studied every detail of the pregnancy, running simulations and preparing for every possible complication. A special delivery room had been built at the new Geneva Medical Institute, equipped with technology from both human and medical science. Everything was ready. But nothing could truly prepare them for what happened next. The labor lasted 14 hours, had never felt pain like this before. Women were supposed to be strong, supposed to endure without complaint, but she screamed until her throat was raw. Daniel stayed beside her through every minute, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, refusing to let her go. Twice, the monitors showed the baby's heart rate dropping dangerously low. Twice, Dr. Cole and his team worked frantically to stabilize the situation. Twice, was certain she was going to lose everything. But humans, she had learned, did not give up easily. At 3:47 in the morning, the cry of a newborn child echoed through the delivery room. Dr. Cole lifted the baby gently, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's a girl," he announced, his voice thick with emotion. "A healthy baby girl." He placed the child in his arms. For a moment, she could not breathe. She could only stare at the tiny creature she had created, this impossible miracle that should never have existed. The baby had silver eyes like her mother, but her hair was brown like her father's, soft and wispy against her small head. Her skin was the color of pale violet, like at twilight, touched with the warmth of human pink. She was small and perfect and alive. "She's beautiful," Daniel said. He was crying freely, making no effort to hide his tears. "She's absolutely beautiful." Touched her daughter's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled around her own, gripping with surprising strength. In that moment, understood something she had never understood before. This was what mattered. Not power, not politics, not royal bloodlines or genetic compatibility. This small, warm weight in her arms was worth more than every empire in the galaxy. "What should we name her?" Daniel asked softly. Thought about it carefully. On children were given names that spoke of conquest and strength, names like victory, dominion, glory. But this child would be different. This child belonged to two worlds, two peoples, two futures. "Hope," said finally. "Her name is Hope." Daniel smiled, leaning down to press a kiss to his wife's forehead and then to his daughter's tiny cheek. "Hope, I like it." Word of the birth spread quickly. Within hours, every human colony knew the name of the first hybrid child. Celebrations erupted across Earth and beyond. Schools declared holidays. Cities lit up their skylines in violet and blue. Parents held their own children a little, inspired by this tiny ambassador of two civilizations. Daniel's family arrived at the hospital that same day, cried when she held her granddaughter for the first time, laughed with pure joy, took dozens of pictures declaring that Hope was already the most beautiful baby in the history of the universe. In the days that followed, messages poured in from every corner of human space. Simple people sent handmade gifts. Scientists sent research proposals. Leaders sent official congratulations. Artists sent paintings and songs and poems dedicated to the miracle child. But the most surprising messages came from. They arrived quietly, through unofficial channels, from ordinary who had heard the story of the Barren princess. Thousands of them reached out, sharing their own experiences. Many were women who had been declared defective-like. Others were men who had lost sisters or daughters or wives to the cruel system of fertility-based worth. They had seen the images of with her baby, seen the happiness on her face, and they wanted to understand. How had she found acceptance among the humans? How had she become valued for who she was rather than what she could produce? How could they create such a world for themselves? Read every message. She answered as many as she could, and slowly she began to realize that her story had become something larger than herself. She had become a symbol of what was possible when civilizations chose compassion over cruelty. 6 months after Hope was born, the first refugees arrived on Earth. They were young women mostly, fleeing arranged marriages and fertility testing, and a society that saw them as breeding stock. They had heard about the princess who had found a better life among the humans, and they wanted the same thing. Earth welcomed them. Schools were established to help them learn human languages and customs. Support networks were created. Slowly, a community formed, a bridge between two civilizations that had once looked down on each other. 20 years later, everything had changed. The empire still existed, but it was no longer the same. The old systems of worth based on fertility had been challenged and gradually dismantled. Emperor had been peacefully removed from power by his own people, who no longer accepted the old cruelties. A new generation was growing up with different values, influenced by the story of a princess who had been thrown away and had found everything. At the center of this transformation was a young woman with silver eyes and violet-tinged skin. She stood before the Galactic Assembly, representing both Earth and the Reformed Republic. She spoke with her mother's grace and her father's quiet conviction. Her name was Hope, and she was just beginning. In the audience, her parents watched with tears in their eyes. Was 98 years old now, still young by standards. Daniel was 63, his hair gray but his eyes still warm with love. They held hands the way they had held hands for 20 years, steady and sure. "She's going to change the galaxy," Daniel whispered. Smiled, remembering the scared young princess who had stepped off a shuttle in New Geneva so long ago. She remembered the council chamber on Prime, the laughter, the mockery, the cruelty of those who had been so certain she was worthless. "They mocked me," she said softly. "They sent me away to die. They never imagined this." Daniel squeezed her hand, and now watched her daughter speak, watched the assembly listen, watched the future unfold before her eyes. She thought about all the impossible things that had happened because a simple human man had held out a flower and offered her friendship. "And now," she said, "I have everything I ever needed." On the stage, Hope finished her speech to thunderous applause. She looked out into the audience and found her parents. She smiled, bright and sure. The miracle was complete, and it was only the beginning.